Hey everyone, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some coffee. My favorite spot, because of the people, because of the coffee beans, all the good stuff, is Cafe 211 in Bentonville. If you're not in the Northwest Arkansas area, though, Cafe 211 also offers their beans and their coffee mugs deliverable, I think, nationwide. So you can create that whole experience from your home. Mauricio Guerrero is the founder of Cafe 211. He is from Guatemala and his coffee is from Guatemala as well. There's a beautiful story that's tied to it. I encourage you to check out the Cafe 211 website, check out Mauricio's story, the story of the coffee and the people who make it, and go ahead and buy some and we can sip it together during our next conversation. And you can use the discount code Cara Elvira 10 to get a 10% discount on your order. Good afternoon, Lucia. I'm so happy you're here. How's it going?
Good. Hi, Cara. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a beautiful sunny day. And I love your outfit. We were just talking about like how we got ready for this situation. And I think a fun way to start today would be to talk about like, what is your strategy when you enter your closet realm? And then I'll give you mine.
I love it. Well, I love this shirt. I got this actually when I was working at Smithsonian Natural History, and it was perfect because it's ferns. And I also have these lovely alligator earrings that you can't
Yes.
really see because of my AirPods, but you know.
I love it. I think it's great. We talked about Mrs. Frizzle earlier. I don't remember
Yeah.
her right name, but
Miss
going on.
Frizzle, yeah. Oh, she's great. Yeah, my partner gave me the most lovely compliment on saying that I had Miss Frizzle vibes, and honestly, that is only what I can
Here
aspire
for
to
it.
be
This
in
is
my
what
life.
I love it. I think it complements my like maybe a little bit crazier kind of situation. I've been working from home today, and so I was just in plain black leggings and a t-shirt. I was like, I need something that really spices up this situation. And so my parents gave me this fun Technicolor floral
That's
denim
great.
coat for my birthday. And this is the first time I'm ripping it out. So maybe it'll get outside
Perfect.
of my apartment next time I wear it. But not for a few months until the temperature goes down. It's pretty hot in Arkansas right now. Um,
That's
so
funny. It's actually pouring in DC right now. It finally cooled down after being very hot for many days. So,
oh my gosh, I think we probably had that a couple days ago, and it's making its way up
yep.
the coast. So I'll give my parents a holler that's on their horizon. In New York City, we're just fully spanning the globe here, and I'm so thankful that you're making the time. I know you're going to be traveling actually to the other coast soon, but for
Yeah.
everyone who doesn't know you, this is Lucia Martino. You are a photographer and artist, and you are at a place many of us probably know, or if we don't, we've heard of, and we look forward to visiting. But before we get to that fun stuff that you're currently in, Lucia, I'd love to understand a bit about your background and where your interest in art and photography kind of began.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people that I didn't really know that being a museum photographer or a gallery photographer was actually a thing. So for anyone watching out there, there are jobs that you don't know about yet, and you can do them. But yeah, I always took pictures when I was a kid, and when I was in high school, I took a really awesome black and white darkroom class, and it was like in this awesome part of our school, which was like in the fourth floor, which was like almost attic-like, and it was where the art space was, and then the dark room, and it was just such a cool space up there. And it really got me into the more like technical things about photography. But I have always loved, taking pictures. And actually, when I was getting ready for college, as I'm sure most college students, they're freaking out about what they're going to do. And I was like, okay, I like taking pictures. I guess I will be a photographer. And so I went to school for photography, which was great. And I do not regret it. I loved going to school for photography and art, and just being able to do all these like hands-on things that I really love. And specifically RIT is Rochester Institute of Technology, and they have a big photography program, and they have a lot of connections with Kodak in Rochester, New York. And just like the history of photography is really there in Rochester, which is just a really cool space to be in. So that sort of just all sort of raised me into like adulthood
Oh,
to get
wow.
into that. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
I would say that's, yeah.
I had no idea that Rochester had that history. So what an amazing place to end up. And I love how you described it of like, I like photography. I'm going to study it. I feel like for me, it wasn't that way. I was like, I like, like the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, but I can't go study like how to run it. Like, I just like, I was always closing the doors to the things I liked as like courses. I was
Oh
like,
no.
studying has to be miserable. Like you have to do the things that you hate. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know where the neurons weren't connecting on that one, but
Yeah.
I think yours is a much more encouraging approach. And when we think about like, so you're studying photography, I have no understanding of what it means to study photography. Did you go in with like, a specific things you liked to photograph, or did you come into certain things that, resonated more with you?
Yeah. So the program specifically was split into different types of photography. So my actual degree was in fine art photography, which of course is its own very like, vague. There's obviously lots of branches of photography, but there was photojournalism, fine art, and then advertising. So fine art to me is more like, I don't know, you think of the artsy things. So that's sort of where like, I guess, like some studio photography, but then also like, maybe the more obscure abstracty projects come from. Those are the fine artists. And then, your photojournalism is like thinking of like going out, think like, news photographers. They're going out and like documenting something. And then you have advertising photography, which again, all of these are very broad and large, channels of photography. But then that would be more, maybe like product photography or like branding. So when you see like Nike, like shoes of like new Nikes, those photos are, would be more like advertising photography. So stuff like that. But so I had, I was like, well, I think I like more like fine art, kind of like abstracty and and maybe obscure, like maybe that gave me a little free pass to be like, I have no idea what I want to do. But so I went in for that specifically. But then there's thankfully like at school, there's lots of opportunities to do each of those things as well. So I took a photojournalism class, I took an advertising class as well, and to sort of dip your toe in the water of all of those different things. So
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
so cool. I'm definitely a fan of like whenever there's a rotational option or a way to try like everything that's on the table.
Yeah.
Like I'm not deciding until you give me the full menu.
Well, and that's what school is supposed to be about, right? It's not necessarily like, I mean, how many like high schoolers or young college students do you know who know exactly what they want to do? And there's nothing wrong with knowing exactly what you want to do, but there's also nothing wrong with being like, I'm going to try a little bit of all these things, because that's probably the only time in my life that I was ever able to do so many things in like such a small period of 4 years,
Yes, it's a really special time that I in many ways don't miss, but in a lot of ways I do. And I think that's what
Yes,
brought me back to get my master's now to do those parts that I missed again of the
definitely.
big thinking and abstract stuff and going into spaces where you don't know what you're doing, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
But so then you're you went to school in Rochester. Right now you're in like the DC metro area, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How did you end up there and what are you working on?
Well, so when I graduated, I, like all college students, I'm sure, or for the most part, don't know what they're going to do after college. So not only do we not know what we want to do before college and in college, but after college, just like universe is just throwing stuff at us, and we're like, but we, so I had been talking with, just people that I knew, trying to make more connections and, always trying to network and stuff. And, picking up professors' ear about a certain thing and, oh, I like this. Can you tell me more about it? And I ended up finding, so it was an art history and museum studies internship at Smithsonian American Art Museum. And so there was that. So I applied to that. But then I was like, okay, or do I want to go to grad school for, more museum studies stuff? because I love museums as well. And I've loved, museums, art galleries, all of those good things ever since I was younger. I was like taking art classes at like 12 years old in the local art gallery. So have that love as well there. So I was trying to like find my little niche in the world, and so I applied to the internship, and then I was also applying to graduate school, and I actually ended up getting into both of those things. And I sort of had to make a decision. I was like, okay, well, this program's always going to be here, and then I was like, but this internship might not be. So I ended up taking the internship and just making the leap and moving to DC. And, I was like sort of under the impression that I wasn't sure how long I was going to stay. The internship was about a year, like this school year. And then, you had the option to extend it during the summer if you wanted. So, there's like options as many internships go. So yeah, I ended up just staying. And then when my internship was done, I was like, okay, well, I guess I will just stay in DC and sort of figure it out. And that's sort of how I ended up here. And then I ended up not leaving, and I'm going to be hitting my 8 year of living here.
Oh my God.
Pretty soon, which is wild to me because I never lived any other place longer than, when your childhood home and then like college. And now it's, I'm an adult now.
Gosh, how does that happen to us?
I don't know.
I love the first city. Well, I only have one city that's become like home for me other than the one that I grew up in. And so I feel like you must feel similarly about,
yeah, absolutely.
It's like the first city that you make your own, that your parents didn't make their own first. And it's like, this is like a whole special situation. Like it's my pizzeria, it's my, hairstylist and everything. But no, that's such a special journey. And I love that you did take that leap. I think, oftentimes maybe school can feel like the safer route, or just like, let's just keep getting education. But I mean, the internship was a once in a lifetime kind of thing.
Yeah.
You just fully leaned in. Is that a typical route to like fine art photography? You mentioned was your focus, and then is museums one of like the main outputs of a fine arts photography degree, or
I would say probably not, although I'm sure there are people who are also photographers who are museum photographers who would disagree with me, but to each their own. But I think my thinking on being in school as a photographer, there was a lot of pressure actually for people to move to New York City and just become a photography studio assistant, or like a little, studio lackey, and, and then sort of work your way up in that realm. And that is also another path. But I did, get a lot of, I don't actually know if any teacher really told me about being a museum photographer, which is kind of wild when I think about that. So like, that was a very thought-provoking question there, because, I'm just thinking back at it. I had a lot of people who would say like, you can't really make a living as a photographer, which is an interesting thing to, maybe tell your students as a photography teacher. Yeah. And then there was the people who were like, you have to move to New York City or you're going to be a nobody kind of thing. And in my thinking, I was like, DC is pretty cool. And there's a lot of really cool things here. And there's a lot of cool things in New York City as well. Obviously, lots of museums and galleries there as well. So I think that they're pretty, equal in that realm. I think DC is a prettier place to live, but I'm biased.
Hot take.
So yeah, but that's very interesting. Yeah. Now I'm just thinking about it, and now I like want to go back to RIT and be like, let me tell you about museum photographers.
Right? No, because I think it is, I know you through your friend Meg, and like just opened this whole world to me of like, wait, like people like work in the museum to make all this happen. Like it doesn't just show up there and just stay there for hundreds of years untouched. Like no, like this is a living, breathing like institution and network of institutions with amazing people like Lucia behind the scenes. So I think that's great to open people's eyes to. And I'm kind of curious about like the different like logistics of it. So you started with the National Gallery of Art, is that right? And then now you were at National History, and now you're at the art one, but there's like a whole network.
Yeah, I'll tell you my whole journey. So my internship started at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Now there are lots of Smithsonian institution organizations. So there was a Smithsonian American Art Museum that I started, and then I was an internship there, and so you're working with different like curators and in different departments and just doing what interns do and like learning all the little ins and outs of this museum. And then I actually extended my internship because I didn't want it to end. And I was just having too much fun, which was great because they were like, oh, sure, we always need people to, do stuff. And like, it was an unpaid internship. So that has its own, hardships as well. So I was doing that, and then I ended up volunteering for a bit. And then I was like working at a pizzeria, and I was like babysitting and doing all this other stuff for money. And finally, like there was another opportunity just from knowing people at American Art Museum. They were like, oh, just so you know, like we know you're a photographer, we know you're interested in photography and museums. There's this opening at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, which actually is in the same building as Smithsonian American Art Museum, but they're two separate museums. so this like the building, here's the building, and it's sort of like cut in half of each side of these two museums. So I stayed with a lot of the same people like nearby, but I was technically, working for a different museum. And actually, I totally skipped a whole part of my journey, but I was also volunteering. Wait, let me go back.
Let's like get the timeline out.
I should have like drawn you a timeline. That would have been much better. Actually, I'm more of a visual person, so just talking like this isn't, Anyways, okay, so internship at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and then I did extend the internship, and then I was volunteering. But then I also was during that I was volunteering. Somebody was saying for Smithsonian American Art Museum in the conservation lab, they were like, oh, we are looking for a photographer. And I literally was like in the background, and I was like, oh, I'm a photographer. And they were just like, who are you? And I was like, hello. They're like, okay, yeah, you should. They're like, okay, you're a photographer. Great. You should email our chief conservator, because it was for their conservation department. And that's sort of how I got into the conservation photography, like art conservation photography. And I was volunteering there for a bit, but then volunteering is also free. And I was like short on money living in DC. And I was like, I'm really sorry, guys, like I can't volunteer anymore. And I have to say, highly recommend saying that to your people if they really need you and really want you, because it wasn't too long after that they came back and they were like, so we need you really bad. And we would love it if they were like, oh, you should become a contractor. And technically I was like a sort of self-employed, like freelancer, but for the government. So I became like my own entity, and then they could hire me as like a government contractor. And that's sort of how I became this like, if you're a government contractor, you can work for the government doing whatever you do in different parts of the government. So all Smithsonian museums are, government museums. So that's sort of how I ended up working with Smithsonian American Art Museum, getting paid as a contractor for the conservation lab doing photography. And then that led into National Portrait Gallery, which I just skipped that whole portion.
I'm so glad you went back though, because like that's so interesting. I live in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is Walmart's like backyard. And so I know of people who are like contractors for Walmart, but I don't know anyone who does government contracting. And I know that like to be a contractor for Walmart's no easy feat. I imagine to be a government contractor is no easy feat either, since they're the US government. And so I think it's kind of amazing that you were like, I'm just volunteering. And then I'm like, but I literally can't pay my bills. So I'm gonna go become a contractor for the US government. Like, that's just, it blows my mind. And I want to know, like, for anyone else who is like in that kind of situation where they want to keep adding value, but they literally, like, they need food in their fridge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you make that, like, that jump? They gave you the encouragement, but then was it just like a bunch of paperwork? Did you have to get your fingers printed? Like, what?
Yes and yes. I'm pretty sure the government has like 12 copies of my fingerprints. So, no, it was a very interesting process, and I'm so glad that like the people that I was volunteering with, told me about it, because otherwise I would have had no idea. And sometimes that's the problem with stuff like this, is like people who have been around a long time, who have been doing these same things, and they know all the ins and out of all this stuff. But people coming in fresh don't know the lingo, don't know the acronyms. We've talked about acronyms a lot. Government loves its acronyms, and that's very non-inclusive to people who don't know what those mean, right? So it's just like how we can talk much faster, I think. So, all those little ins and outs that people don't know. So if that person had never said, oh, you should sign up for this so we can actually pay you, and then you can come back because we need you, I would have never known that. So they did that, and I had no idea. So they sort of helped me through it. But honestly, shout out to my mom, Gina, who knows, she is an accountant. She knows everything about like money, the IRS, like all of that stuff. She helped me with like this crazy long form. And of course, it's one of those forms where you can't stop in the middle. So you just have to sit for, sorry, this curl is like all in my business.
I have a situation. I just go like this.
Yeah. It was a very long process. And of course, then, you have this giant form, and then you hit submit, and you're like, oh, great. And no, that just bumps you to the next section, which just takes you even longer. So it was quite the process. Thankfully, it's one of those things that you do it once, and it takes a really long time, and then you never have to do it again. And then now every year, I just have to click through and update it and be like, okay, great, and re-registered, got it.
Oh my gosh, thank goodness.
It is a wild process. And I would say, like, knowing that people have gone through that process is super helpful. I still don't know what a lot of those, it was like, did you read this form? And you're like, yes, check. I did read that form. It's like 20 pages, and there's 5 of those forms. So you're like, am I going to read all of these? Am
I going to retain any of it? Like, even if I do, is crazy.
Like, how many people read the terms and conditions and they just click accept, submit, right? The same thing as that.
Oh my gosh. But I think some of the things that you said that were really important there was like having internal advocates always is going to be like hugely important for like moving yourself forward. And like people who know the ins and outs. I love a good mom shout out. I think that was huge.
Yes.
And then just like patience with the process, like the act of even volunteering to the point of like not being able to, like, needing to stop, like really seriously needing to stop to be able to pay your bills. It says something to an organization probably about like your sincerity, like your earnestness, just like passion for what you're doing versus someone who comes in from the street and is like, I don't have time to volunteer. Like I need this right now. And some people, like, you really do need to work right now. But I think it's really cool how you just persevered through the hurdles and like whatever new hula hoop was added. It's like, all right, find another person, do another step.
And it's definitely one of those things where it's just, it's wild to think that I've been here 8 years, and we can talk about it, but only just recently got a real full-time, not contractor position. So that is its own journey for sure. But yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize enough like how, like, having those internal advocates, and like specifically knowing when there's new people too, and like, you don't have to like bring every single new person under your 2 little wings, but it is very helpful if you have like a whole crew of people to be like, okay, and we're gonna give you 2 new people, and we give you 2, just to be like, here's a tour of the building, and here's I understand because I could not figure out how to do this when I first got here, and it's definitely harder if you've been at a place maybe for like 20 years and things have changed and you're like, I have no idea. Like that was different when I was here. So maybe even having people who have just been at places like a few years to be like, here's the ins and outs and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think too, what's great with your example is like you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Like you didn't have to scour the internet to find stakeholders and like buy them coffee and woo them. Like you needed to do the work that they needed help with. Like you just needed
Yeah.
to be there doing the grunt work so that someone could come over and be like, oh, thanks for doing that. By the way, like why are you doing this for us for free? Like
Yeah.
and start that kind of conversation. So they give you a tour, that you give someone else a tour, and it just like organically, like meeting the needs that are present and not trying to like just go crazy with the fanfare around it. I think
Yeah.
is a really good, sincere way to be, and it's clearly been pretty cool for your journey. So now you do have like an official role within the institution, right? And you started 2 weeks before the pandemic, I think I remember you saying. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, paint me the picture of all that.
Yeah. So we're, well, at the risk of not skipping something again, after I was at Smithsonian American Art Museum, and then I went to Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. I was again a contractor, and that was only for a year. So then I got another contracting position when I was at Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, hence the ferns. And I was there the longest of the Smithsonian. I was there for about 3 years, which was awesome. But then, yeah, that was, again, still contracting as a contractor. And then, yeah, so 2 weeks, before pandemic, I sign on to be a full-time non-contractor photographer at the National Gallery of Art. So that was awesome, but it definitely has been very strange, being a museum photographer from home. You can't really do that so well. I can't be like, I'm just gonna borrow this Roscoe real quick. Don't worry, I'll bring it back later and just shoot it at home. I take it home on my bike because I bike to work, right? So that's fine.
Oh my gosh. So a few different logistical changes, but even just from the contractor to like the, I don't know what the right term, like fully on board, like individual.
A federal employee, yeah.
Federal employee. So like, is there a difference in how work comes to you? Like when you're a contractor, do you have to kind of like advertise internally for people to use your like services in photography, and like now you don't have to? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think, as a photographer or as a contractor, it's a little scary because especially if you have contracts that are timed, so when I was at Smithsonian American Art Museum, they were only for like a few months at a time, or for like a certain set of hours, which, I would spread out to however we could make it work. But it was always just like, I mentioned networking before, and really talking with people, and like, most people know that you're a contractor. So a lot of the times people would be amazing. Just be like, hey, you do this. I saw this thing, you should apply for it, or so-and-so talked about this. And all of a sudden you have this inside scoop, which is amazing. But, definitely putting yourself out there a little bit to try and find those, or, if you think someone's cool, you got to reach out and be like, hey, do you know of any other opportunities? Because my contract is ending soon, stuff like that. But there is a way in the system, that long paperwork, online paperwork that I was telling you, to become a contractor. There is a way to get like notifications of stuff, but I've never found those. There's a lot of spam emails that go into that, and I've never really found any contracts that way. But it's mostly been from word of mouth, or people saying that, just, especially internally with Smithsonian, it's a very large network. So there's always lots of people, trying to find contractors and stuff. So, but as a federal employee now, I did the classic, like, submit through USA Jobs and all of that, which is its own horrible process. And so thankfully, I don't have to worry about a job now, which is, one of the benefits of being a federal employee, for sure. At least, so I was a contractor total for about 5 years, maybe like 5.5 years. Yeah, so it's nice not to have to think about, oh, the year's coming to an end. I gotta find a new job, which I know I did for many years, and people do all the time. So
Yeah. Sounds like a cool transition then, or new hurdles,
yeah.
I'm sure. Um, Speaking of, like you mentioned, being a museum photographer during a pandemic when you're at home is not entirely feasible. Like, what did that time look like for you when you couldn't bike these different pieces home to your house and set up shop?
Yeah. Well, we did a lot of, especially early on in the pandemic, a lot of these like camera companies, or all of these different groups that, photographers or museum people or conservators are all a part of. We're doing these amazing like free programs, which is really great. Even just like an hour course here, an hour course here, or, oh, we usually charge for this, but we're just gonna, make it free, which was amazing. That sort of, trickled away, which is kind of sad. It was nice to have all of those resources right there.
Yes.
But it was a lot of that. And, it was kind of like, I can only imagine is like people doing, like school courses from like remotely now, virtually. So, a lot of screen time. So making sure I get outside and not burn my eyeballs out.
Yeah, I think that's been a general feeling of the last year. We all need more eye drops now than we did before. More Blu-ray. Was it blue light, Blu-ray? Not Blu-ray,
Yeah.
the DVDs, blue light glasses.
Yeah. For your screens and
Yes,
stuff. Yep.
all the things. But has it, are you back in person now, at least a little bit? Like, is it starting to feel more like the job as envisioned?
Yeah. It's been a lot better, even just of the last few weeks. We were going in a couple of times here and there, especially if there were only just, projects that came in and were really urgent right away. But yeah, thankfully we're in about 2 to 3 days a week now. So it feels a little more normal, and we can get some projects done on site actually. So
Yes,
yeah.
getting there, which is so exciting. And we've spoke about like some different types of photography that happen in the museum world. There's like cultural heritage photography, exhibits, documentation, conservation, like event photography. Like, and I think you've touched them all at one point or another. But I'd love for you to like break that down a little bit, if you may, and talk about how they're kind of involved in your role right now, or maybe the ones that are not.
Yeah. So I think it's easiest to do. So right now, most of my priorities of photography for the National Gallery of Art is it's kind of a mix. It's anything from event photography to like staff portraiture and headshots, to any of the collection photography. So any of the artworks that either will come into the studio or that will go off into the galleries and photograph. Architecture photography, and I don't know if I already said events, but that as well. And then also just any sort of behind the scenes like documentation photography. So the other day, an installation was going up, and it was from a living artist. So she wanted some photos of just how it was. She couldn't be there in person, so she wanted all of those like installation photos, and it's good for the gallery to document those, and whether it's just like where it was or how it was hung and what it looked like and all of that stuff. So yeah, so those are all the things I do now. Like I said, it's getting like we're doing more stuff now, obviously, than the last year, but not as much conservation photography now. There are some things I'll probably assist on, but we have a whole conservation department that actually tackles a lot of their own photography, or if they don't, then they'll ask for assistance on some of that. So yeah.
Wow. And what is conservation photography? Like, is it photographing like how something looked at one point and then conserving it and photographing it again, or is it something totally different?
You pretty much nailed it. But so conservation photography can be a couple of different things. So when I was at Smithsonian American Art Museum in the conservation lab, a lot of what I did was photographing an artwork, before the conservators worked on it, specifically like I mostly photographed the paintings that they worked on. So it'd be photographing a painting, maybe it had like a big gash in it or something in the canvas, and they want to document what it looks like before, you know, as is. And then sometimes the conservators will be like, well, I've stitched that canvas now, and I have to, you know, paint in some of those areas, but can you photograph it in the middle of the process? So you might have like a during treatment photography. So you have your before treatments, during treatments, and then when they're completely done, you have your after treatment photography. And that's just good to have as documentation to see either what they did or how it looked before, or, you know, for lots of good reasons. And, you know, because these conservators are amazing. They are like, conservators are wizards with things. You're like, you worked on that? And you're like,
I get why you need the photos then. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and
Cool.
and it's pretty cool too. A lot of what I did at American Art was like some UV photography, and they use that a lot to determine like different paints fluoresce different ways under ultraviolet light. So they had this whole grid of different paints. It was kind of like handy little color guide right here. They would have this little swatch of all of these paint samples, and then you'd blast some UV light on it. And if they would fluoresce in different ways, it might be, you know, if all of these were whites, but there are different kinds of white, and they would all fluoresce differently, which is like have this illumination of different ways according to the UV light. It's pretty amazing. And they could determine what kind of paint it was, when it was from, and like what color under this light. And I'm just like, how are you doing this? So, but yeah, having that documentation is very important while they're doing that work as well.
So I feel like a lot of the skill in photographing for a museum, specifically for conservation, for that UV light situation, would probably be like learned as like an apprentice or through your internships and stuff. But I wonder too, for the photographer who's not in the museum space yet, who hopes to be like, you know, working alongside you or something, when they're building their portfolio before they're in a museum space, like, should they be practicing photographing in a certain way? Like, are you like zooming in a lot on that? Like, I don't even know how you would articulate it, but like, what are kind of the photographing skills that are most unique maybe to the museum space?
I would say in general, having a good like baseline understanding of like camera specs. And that doesn't mean you need to know like, you know, everything. I mean, I know people who know everything about every kind of lens, and I'm like, I don't know how you retain that knowledge. I just know that I need this lens for this scenario. So you can know all of that stuff, and that's amazing. But, you know, just knowing like, oh, if you can just like know off the top of your head, like, oh, yeah, this lens is good for like this scenario or this setup, or I can get a good, you know, range with, you know, these two lenses or something. Stuff like that is good. But I will say a lot of that knowledge came from me, you know, just having access to different equipment that was not mine, because that equipment is very expensive. So either like knowing people, or having an internship or something is very helpful to get that. But also you can, you know, study a lot of this stuff as well, but the hands-on experience is really great. So having sort of a little bit of both is really good. And I would also say the other thing, man, it's hard to think, I guess. Well, you know, I'll give you an example. I used to think I was really terrible at studio photography, which is being in a controlled, you know, photography studio, which would be like a room and having like a backdrop and lights that you plug in and set up, and you're controlling all of that. And in college, I thought I was horrible at that. I left college being like, I'm never going to use photography in the studio because I'm a fine art photographer and we don't go in the studio.
Never say never, right?
I'm just laughing at how awesomely naive that was of me to say that. But also I underestimated myself, because, you know, it can be a little daunting for sure, and I still find myself doing this, but like, yeah, like if you're like, decent at something, you can get better at it for sure. We are not going to come out of college knowing all of this stuff, or coming out of internships is like, it's just using myself as an example. Like, it has taken me 8 years and there are still things that I don't know, and that's okay. I'm like learning as I go. And then the best thing is when you do something like once, or you get an idea about it, or you read about it, and you're like, and then the next time you're like, oh, I know a little bit about that. So you feel that much better about it. So I guess at least studying up on some things like, so for instance, conservation photography, one of the things I haven't done is RTI photography, which is reflectance transformative imaging. I'm going to double check myself on that.
One of the finicky acronym situation.
Yeah. And of course, I just typed in RIT photography. Yes, reflectance transformation imaging. I always say transformative. See, not knowing everything, guys. It's okay. And that's why acronyms can be good and bad, because you don't need to know the full name of it. But then if you need to, you should know it. Anyways, so I've never actually done that, but there are maybe some instances at National Gallery of Art that I might need to. But since I've never done it physically, but I've read about it, at least it helps to like, watch a tutorial, or, just read about the newest research or the newest software about that, just to have that little bit of insider knowledge. And that can just help you at least know what's going on, And guys, seriously, Google is your friend.
Yes.
Like, it is the most amazing tool in the world. If you don't know something, you can Google it, and you better bet that there's like a million other people who know the answer to it. And that's great.
And a million people who also don't know the answer yet, which is also great because it makes you realize you're not alone.
Yes. And it's just like, it is an underestimated thing. If I'm in the middle of editing on Photoshop and I'm like, oh crap, what do these little sliders mean again at the top? I always forget with this tool and yada, yada. You better believe I'm like, okay, Adobe Forum, awesome, great. Thank you, Froggy120, awesome, great. And then you just go about your day. And then the next time when your colleague's like, man, I really don't know how to use this tool, I'll be like, I Googled it the other day, I got you.
I got you, as cited by Froggy. This is
exactly right. So, oh man, yeah, sorry, that was like a whole tangent.
I'm here for it. I'm a big Google fan. I think that's wonderful. And I think I just really loved too the different insights you gave into the types of photography you do, especially like the behind the scenes stuff. I'm envisioning now like those parties from like the 60s that there's these epic photos of now, because someone was kind of just like shooting what was happening, right? Like we love maybe Andy Warhol for his posters, but we also love like a little candid shot of him and like some other artist or whatever. And I think at these national institutions, there's going to be so many times people want to reflect back on what was happening in the space when the art was there, like at that moment in time, like post-COVID, when people started coming back to museums. Like, is there a part of your photography or a type of photography in your work at the museums that's been like most fulfilling for you or most exciting?
Well, definitely. I mean, I do really love a good behind the scenes photo. And I feel like I say that phrase. I think I said that yesterday. Like, I do love a good behind the scenes photo because you kind of just get a little sneak peek into something that's going on. And then the best part about it is then like I'm taking those photos so other people can see these things that are happening too. So it's like not just for me, which I think is awesome. And, it's great when those behind the scenes photos, it's like, just what you're saying, like, maybe an artist bio and there's them like posing by their artwork or something. And, I think it's a lot of fun to see all that stuff. And I love seeing all the things that go into making a museum or a gallery what it is. I mean, it takes so many people. It's like when you see credits on a film, it's just they're going and going, because it is not one person. It's like we are all just working at this giant thing. And it's kind of amazing all the things that need to be, all these humans that need to be for the gallery to be. So it's pretty cool.
Yes, I'm really glad you mentioned all the humans, all the moving parts, because I think what's really great about your role too is that it's not just, or maybe this is the annoying part for you, I don't know, but it's not just taking the photo, right? Like there's so much that you have to do with that photo to make sure that it's usable by anyone else, right? Or can get into their hands. So I know you've spoken to me a little bit before about like, you have to create the image, but then you have to like file it a certain way because there's like many images across all of these Smithsonian institutions and
Yeah.
national galleries and stuff. Like, what's your kind of like start to finish process like? So you get this assignment, and then do you have to make like a schema, like a timeline? Do you have to create a project plan? Like, I feel like you could move into any industry and do operations. With
um, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a process. So my general process of this stuff is, you're right, it generally starts with me getting assigned, but sometimes even before then, it's somebody, I like to call it like a whisper in the wind of somebody being like, well, I would really like, you're in the hall drinking your coffee. Wait, in the break room, because you can't drink your coffee in the hallways of the museum. So you're in the break room, and you're chatting with your colleagues, and they're like, oh, I'm doing, we're putting up this exhibit, and oh yeah, actually we could really maybe use some photos. Oh, the exhibit is next year, whatever. Okay. And then, maybe, or let's say it's like in a few months, and you're like, okay, all right, so maybe that is something that's going to come down the pipeline to you eventually. And I like to like write things down. I like to write down those whispers, just because in case they do come something, I'm not just like thrown off and then like, wait, what? Like I'll be like, oh yeah, I was talking to Becca about that, great, let's do it. So sometimes it's just that, or sometimes, yeah, my supervisor will get a request in and say, okay, like, Lucia, you're going to be the photographer on this. And then what I'll usually do is coordinate whoever opened the request. It's usually just like one person, but it might be like one person, but they're working with 3 other people in the department to, get this photography. So, and then depending on what it is, we'll be emailing back and forth, maybe have some meetings to clarify some stuff. They might give us a shot list, or we might say, oh, do you just want us to like use our creative? And then it doesn't have a word, it's just that. Yeah. To just, do what we think is best. And then, so yeah, then usually we'll schedule, either something has a specific date and it's like, this is the only time photography happens, or, oh, this is just our deadline, and whenever you have the moment, you can do this. So depending on the kind of photography, we'll gather equipment. If it's for a studio, we might say that's got to be in a certain studio. If it involves like moving any artworks, obviously like our registrar's office, which is like is like all the collections managers and all the art handlers and curators and stuff are coordinating to get that stuff moved. But if it's just an event, or we're going out into the gallery to shoot, then that doesn't require any like moving of those things. So it kind of just depends on what the type of photography is. But yeah, gathering equipment, so that's purely on the photographers. So whatever we need, and I usually bring a lot more stuff than I'm going to need. Yeah, oh yeah, I mean, it's funny, you wouldn't be like, there are just so many times that you could use a piece of tape or like a Sharpie, or just some random thing that you're like, maybe I'll just throw it in the bag, and then you do, and then you end up using it, and you're like, thank God I brought that. It saved the day, or it saved me from having to go to the other building to get it, and we saved 30 minutes or something. So
yes.
And then, yeah, so then the photography itself, which again just depends. It might be a few hours, it might be an hour, it might be a few days or whatever. It's sort of, again, it just depends on the type of photography. And then I got this like rule of thumb of timeline when I was at natural history, and it was that however long it takes you to photograph something, double that time to edit it, which I think is a good rule of thumb. So if you think about it, if a photo shoot takes a whole day, you're not going to edit that photo and give it to that person later that day. They'll probably get it at the end of the week, So I always liked that. I never really thought about like the doubling aspect of that. But then, so then photo shoot is done, putting all these images onto our computer, making a million backup copies just so we don't lose anything. If you have any metadata to put in, which is like information that you can embed in the image, so it'll sort of travel with the image.
So it travel like what that's very cool, but like what? Like how does it do that? How is it traveling?
Yeah. Okay, let's see. I can always think of really good ways to describe this. Okay, so if I'm glad I have lots of paper on my desk.
Yay, a diagram.
Yeah, I told you I'm a visual person.
This is a really like Mrs. Frizzle, whatever her name is, moment, I feel like. Like this is great.
I wish, I have my yellow camera back here. I wish I had my yellow school bus somewhere. Okay, if this piece of paper is your image, right? So wherever this image goes, right? Metadata, which is literally data about data, or data of data, is information that gets embedded in your images. And what that means is all the information. So when you take a picture, even just with your smartphone, things get recorded. Think of like similar to like GPS and location, but not. But it's things like what the size of the image is. It might be also the location, what device it was taken on automatically gets embedded. Stuff like that, at least for phones. With cameras, like larger DSLRs, they embed other things like the settings that you use. What else? Like the things as simple as like the date it was created. So stuff like that. So if this is your image, and then this is your metadata, is this text. I hope it's not backwards for you. It's backwards for me. Okay, great. This is all your image, and then you have all this other great metadata. That's awesome. Now wherever this image goes, this information is also going.
That's crazy.
So things, and so there's like inherent metadata, which is all that stuff I just told you that the device automatically puts into these images. But you can also change and add metadata and delete metadata as well. So if I wanted to add like a description or, put like a credit line, or there's an artist and title and all the information, there are different softwares that let you put in this metadata and you can just add it in. And so then if I send you this, goes to you. I wish you had your own piece of paper that you could just popped up there.
We had to practice that part.
We should have. And then you have your image and you're like, oh, great. Oh, when day was it created? What is the title of this piece? You can just open your metadata and actually it would have been, and there it is. And it is always going to go where this digital file is going to go. Was that helpful?
Perfect. So is that used mostly like photographer to photographer, or are there other like expertise areas that are making use of that metadata? Because as I understand from what you've like maybe shared with me previously, like museum has procedures for how you do that metadata stuff. Like this is people are paying attention to it.
Yeah. So both. So definitely photographer to photographer, and maybe like digital people know more about metadata, definitely, but there are ways that it can be very helpful for just your like regular average person. So if you needed to see any of this stuff, you would have to sort of like dig a little for it. Like, I could just open it on Adobe Bridge and I would see it, but a regular person might not know, who's not a photographer, not very tech savvy, might not know that they can do that. So having, any sort of like instructions, if people don't know how to do that, is very helpful as well. And making sure they have that software, if that's something they need. If they don't, it doesn't really matter, but this metadata is still going to be part of this image no matter what. So if 50 years from now, I hope that these softwares will still be around to view this stuff 50 years from now. They'll be able to open this image and be like, oh my gosh, this was taken 50 years ago. Look, here's all this information. And, so it can be pretty amazing to see that. But it's definitely helpful for keeping track of things, and the fact that it is, with this, it's not going to go anywhere. I'm very passionate about metadata. We could have a whole conversation about it, so you need to cut me off.
Oh no, that's perfect. And I thank you for going down the rabbit holes, but I had cut you off because you were at the metadata point. So like, what happens next? We'll go circle back from my cutting you.
No, you're good. So if there is that sort of metadata, that will get put into the image. And then generally, I will do any sort of edits that I think are needed. Maybe the person who put in the photography request has their own things that they, need to happen to the images. And then, when I think it looks good and it's all the things that they wanted are checked off of my list, the image is done, and we'll make what's called derivatives. So that would be like if you have your raw file, which are the files that come right out of the camera, and then you can make your derivatives, which is just different like versions of these images that usually end up being like different size JPEGs. So if people just want to print a small image, or if they just want to email it or something, there's different sizes and different specifications that you can do for those different files. So if you wanted something to like print on a giant poster, you would need a really large file, versus if somebody just wanted to, maybe even just print it in a small book. Those are going to be it's going to be same image, but the way that you process them out will be different.
I remember you mentioning, okay, so I'm gonna throw some acronyms back at you, and I don't know the answers, so it's not like you could literally tell me anything. But FADGI and AIC Guidelines being something that was part of your process, and so I wondered, even in the abstract, if you could speak to like what sort of guidelines you have to be like aware of when you're doing this photography.
Yeah. So those two that you just mentioned are, so AIC is the American Institute for Conservation. So that's actually like an organization that has their own like technical specifications on how they prefer images to be. So there are certain things that if you edit, if you edit too much in the digital file, then it becomes a separate thing than what the actual image is. So if you think of like forensic photography, it's very similar. Like you have a forensic photographer who comes on the scene. If they take a photo of something, I don't want to say something really dramatic, but there's like a hammer on the ground or whatever, and they take a picture of that, and then they go into Photoshop and they add in another hammer, then that becomes, they've edited that too much, and that's not what was on the real scene, right? It's similar in conservation photography.
No over editing.
No over editing. So there are certain things that you can do there that make it acceptable to conservation standards, that it's not too much editing, but is enough that is acceptable. And then, so again, acronyms, FADGI is, everyone just says FADGI.
FADGI.
It's the Federal Agency's Digital Guidelines Initiative, which you can, as you can imagine, is way easier to say FADGI than it is to say all of that. And that is, not everyone follows these standards, but there's different like star ratings for FADGI. And it's a similar thing. It's like technical guidelines for photography or digitization, and that's specific to cultural heritage materials. So that would be anything in a cultural heritage institution, like a museum or a gallery. And same thing as AIC. They have certain standards that you have to follow. It's funny, it goes by like star ratings. So FADGI 4-star is like the highest standard of what you would want if you were going to follow this specifically to a T for your digitization for cultural heritage stuff. So
to me, that just like blows my mind. Like people are so intentional. Like there's so many people thinking about this every day, that there are stars and there's names for the acronyms. Like it comes up that much. I mean, and it's like the public probably, or at least I, as a member of the public, have negative, like zero awareness of all of it. So I thank you for like taking us through.
We can get pretty nerdy. Photographers can get pretty nerdy about this stuff, especially museum people, or like anyone can get nerdy about whatever they love, right? But
I can't wait though. I think everyone who watches this, at their next time that they get to safely see people, should be asking them, like, they look at a photo, like, is that a FADGI 4-star like situation?
I hope so. I hope I hear people whispering that, like in the galleries.
I think that would be great. Oh my gosh, I love it. So I want to make sure that I ask you about this as well. Like you have, personal work in photography and documentary photography that you capture, and tie-ins to your family. I'd love to explore a little bit about like what you're doing with your craft and with this skill set outside of your everyday work.
Yeah. Well, actually, since we last talked, I was poking through some of my older photos just because I was re-inspired again. So thanks for re-inspiring me to look through that stuff. One of the things we talked about was that I think we talked about it. With photographers are notorious for just taking pictures and then never doing anything with them. We just have hard drives, and there's like, I have like 30,000 images on my iPhone. It's like ridiculous, but yeah, my personal photography, at least of lately, has mostly been just like, I use my phone a lot, my iPhone, to just sort of document things that I think are interesting, like small moments, like everyday moments. Mm-hmm. And actually, I just started, when I first came into the Instagram world, sounds old saying that, I wasn't gonna do like a professional photography Instagram, but I recently dove into that, and I have to say, I really like it a lot. It is a lot of work. So honestly, anyone who is a full-time social media, whatever, they are incredible. I can like barely post something once a day. I even had an alarm set for a while on my phone, and I would just ignore it and be like, whatever.
Stressful.
I just break all my own rules, Cara, like.
Go for it. Rebel
stuff. Yeah, but that's been a lot of fun, sort of connecting with people there. And also on that, so it's a mix of like some stuff that, like I told you, I just sort of hoard photos. So I recently went through a lot of photos on my phone, and anything that was like remotely artistic to me, that wasn't just like a photo of my cat or my dog or, a pretty flower or something, like, or a screenshot of a funny GIF or whatever,
A lot of those on my phone.
Exactly. You're like, it's like, oh, I thought of this of you. And so I went through and sort of made a folder of that stuff, and that's sort of what generates my my professional photography Instagram. And so that, as well as a lot of like travel photos that I have on my phone, again, just like hoard them on there. So like usually when I travel, I will bring obviously my phone. I have this awesome, I should have. Hang on, I think I have it.
Yay.
Oh.
We love a good show and tell.
Well, this is pretty great. First off, it's in a little case and it has a string.
Yeah.
Who's ready for this? And it's just this really beat up Olympus.
Oh my gosh.
Shoot. It's called the Stylus Tough. The name has rubbed off of the front. I think I've had this since college. So I don't even know how long that's been. Like 8 years,
Wow.
9 years. It's pretty great. I bought this specifically because it's waterproof and it's drop proof, and it has held up to the test of time for sure. But the great thing about this is that it has actual buttons, and that always confuses my younger cousins because they try to touch the screen. And I'm like, do you see these? These are buttons on the side. They're 3D buttons.
What a throwback. That's to say.
So this is great. So I love taking this. It is, I have to say, it is a terrible quality now that I like know better, but I still love it because it's like now it's, first it was great, and then your phones got to be so much better. And now this is like so old school, and there's like different settings that you can make it weird things. Anyways, bringing this along with me, and then sometimes also like a regular DSL, like DSLR, like a bigger camera. But those are more fun, and they're a little easier because they're handheld and stuff. So what were we even talking about? What am I even talking about?
Yeah, no, you're talking about in general your personal like photography pursuits, different ways that you use this skill in your day-to-day life, or use this passion that you have for taking photos. But I think it segues really well into just like, for you, Lucia, like, why does art and photography matter? Like, what keeps inspiring and motivating you in this space?
Oh man, I don't think I could get out of it if I tried, It's definitely just a part of me. It's I love I think I love photography too, because when I see something and then I take a picture of it, and then later on I have that sort of a visual documentation of like how I felt in that moment is very big. And I'm also very big on keeping memories, as we all are, right? But photography is definitely the way that I do that as well. That and like writing as well. So having those visual memories, and yeah, I don't know. It's just great. Art is just great. I don't know really how else to describe it. It makes me feel good. I love it when it connects me with other people too, and or they see something in like a photo I took, and it really, either they feel the same, or it makes them like feel a certain way, or we like connect on a level that they're like, yes, yeah, you felt this, and I also feel that. And so I guess like connection on that as well.
Yeah. And I think it's so nice how it's, for you, probably how it's so interwoven. Like you said, you couldn't get yourself out of the space if you tried. Like,
Yeah.
it's amazing that you get to be in it. Like, that's just something that's just really special. And so I also love to ask people, if there's any like lessons you've learned along the way, or advice that you've received, or that you've just like stumbled into because you've dealt with it yourself, that you think is worth sharing with anyone who is creative, or is trying something new, or is trying to enter a space, whether it's photography or not, that you'd like to share.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Advice for artsy people. Well, it's funny, is I knew you were going to ask this, and I was like, I gotta think of an answer for this, because this is a hard one. And and it's funny because I think what I'm going to say is something that is one of those things I should take my own advice, but
Usually how
I
it goes.
I break my own rules, as I've mentioned. But definitely just trying to find inspiration, even if you think there's absolutely no inspiration. And you'd be surprised, I think, on like ways that you can find inspiration. I mean, it might just be as simple as like hanging something up on your wall that like makes you like, is like nice. And maybe it's like a photo, or maybe like it's like a little illustration or something. Like, I have this great thing from this artist. It says, "Try not to murder anyone today." And it's an awesome, right? It makes me laugh every time. It's very like beautifully crafted in this little gold frame. And it's just great. I don't know. So something like that, where it's just like surrounding yourself with fun things that like make you feel inspired. And I found this great book recently. Oops. Oh, it's downstairs, otherwise I'd get it. But it's by Austin Kleon. I think that's how you say his last name. Hang on, I gotta look up the title so I don't butcher it for you. So he has a Steal Like an Artist book, but that's not the one I'm thinking of.
I have that in my Amazon book list though. Have you read it?
Yes, it's amazing. Oh, here it is. It's called Keep Going, 10 Ways to Stay Creative in Good Times and Bad. It
So
is awesome.
timely. That sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
it's so great. It honestly, when I'm feeling like I'm just totally not inspired either by myself or by anything I'm doing, or I can't find anything, like it's really hard. And sometimes you got to just make yourself do stuff. But that book was awesome to read, especially during pandemic. And I sort of started I think I started my um, Instagram not too long before reading that. And it was just like the perfect thing to sort of like push through and be like, yes, like this is great. Like,
Yes.
I guess keep going is what I'm saying. I have a hashtag that I put on my Instagram that's is, there's like the whole like keep going, keep doing your thing, but it's keep creating. And again, I told you I got to follow my own advice here, but it can be hard. And sometimes you got to just like do something. If I don't know, is this answering it?
Yes,
Like you
no,
just got
I
to
think
do.
keep going is a great truth, and it's so important, and it's so easy to just like not want to. Like I'm like, why
Mhm.
am I torturing myself? Like I could go back to what I was doing before, and it would be fine. But
Yeah.
no, we're moving forward for a reason. It felt good. It sounded good 3 days ago. Now that you're in it, keep moving forward is universally, we all need to hear it. So I appreciate it, Lucia. And then finally,
Yeah.
what do you want people to leave knowing about you, and what are you looking forward to?
Oh, let's see. Well, let's start with what I am looking forward to, I guess. Honestly, being able to travel again after a pandemic. I love taking photos when we travel, and like I said, not only to have those memories, but sometimes like you can just spend so much time, you know, taking all these photos, and then one really great one comes along and you're like, yes, that just sums up the whole trip. Even
Yeah.
if it's like a little detail of just something small, and it just sort of just makes you think about all that. So I'm definitely excited to travel again and be able to take photos in not my house or not my neighborhood or my front yard. It's like
Yes, I get that.
um so yeah, that I'm excited to do that. And actually, there are some of my travel photos, past travel photos, which had never really resurfaced, which is why I was eager to get them onto my Instagram as well. So, and then leave knowing about me. Gosh, that's a hard one. Um, but you can be Miss Frizzle if you want. No.
Yes.
In your own way. No. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess if anyone ever needs information about being a museum photographer, come find me. I'll be like romping around any museum or gallery or wherever with you'll see me on the one with the camera. So I don't know. I guess just when we were talking about before on how I was saying that I was thinking about how being a museum photographer never really occurred to me, and it never really heard about it from anyone, or maybe once or something, but
Yeah.
in school. So I don't know, I guess I would like to be a resource for anyone who wants that. I know it's a very like small field, but we're pretty cool, and
I think that's wonderful. And so kind to like avail yourself to people in that way. I mean, I cold emailed you and you were so nice to me. And I'm so glad that I have you as a friend now in the DC
yeah,
area. I can't wait. I'll probably let you know in advance before I show up at a museum, but it would have been cool to stumble upon you anyway. We'll have to like schedule something and you'll show me the inside scoop of these special places.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, that would be great. Seriously, come to DC whenever. We'll be here. So
Thank you. Oh, it was such a pleasure, Lucia. Thank you again for taking the time, for sharing your story and your craft and all the wonderful ins and outs of these government places that we wonder about, but we
yeah.
never learn more about. So this has been really great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Cara. It was really great. And like I said when we first emailed, it was very nice that you were interested in my work. Made me feel good. So